Sunsets and sunrises are perhaps one of the most beautiful natural phenomena that occur on planet Earth. At no other time of the day can we get these very rich oranges and blues and pinks and gradients like you do during a sunset or a sunrise. In today's video, I'd like to show you guys a great way to capture silhouetted videos of you and your friends cracking whips in front of the sunset. Before we get into the video today, I want to share with you a wonderful website called Sunset WX that is used to forecast the likelihood of a beautiful sunset. It takes things into account such as weather models, humidity, temperature, how many clouds are in the air, how high those clouds are up. And the warmer colors indicate where you are more likely to see a beautiful sunset, whereas the cool colors indicate where you might not even see a sunset at all, such as if there's too many clouds. Today, we find ourselves at the beautiful southern tip of Lake Michigan at Indiana Dunes State Park, and people will actually drive here out of state just to experience it here and observe the sunsets. The next thing I really like to do is find a place that's already pleasing, whether or not you or a subject is in the frame. Try to find a place where if you pulled your camera out and snapped a picture, it would already look beautiful. And then when you step into the frame and start cracking the whip, it's just going to make it that much better. Personally, I like to have an unobstructed view of the sun setting. So if there's some trees in the way, it doesn't always work as well as it could. Here, we have a full view of the entire horizon. We can watch the sun all the way until it slips below that horizon. If you do have some trees in the area or you're kind of confined for space, you can still make this work, but I just think you cannot beat that clear unobstructed view of the horizon. Now in today's video, I am going to be using what might look like a bit of an intimidating camera to anyone who's not a photographer or a filmmaker. Don't be intimidated by this. There's really only 3 things that you really should know when using one of these cameras. But all that to say, you can use a Sony DSLR. This is a Sony a6400, but you can get away with it just fine if you use a modern day smartphone. Especially some of the new Samsung phones as well as the new iPhones take unbelievably clear video, so you can use a phone just fine. I'll be showing you how it looks on this camera, which I use for all of my videos on all my YouTube channels, and we'll also use my $200 Motorola smartphone and compare the two. I like to try to pick a place that is sometimes a little bit elevated. For example, if there's a large stone, if there's a sand dune, I'll sometimes climb up on it to just kind of put more focus on, sounds weird to say, put more focus on myself. Because I guess you could say that you are the subject of a shot like this. So it just adds a little bit of focus to you, and the beautiful warm sunset in the background is kind of complimenting you or your friends of what you're doing, which is cracking the whip. So let's get started. Alrighty, friends. Okay, so the sun is going to be setting in the next 10 to 15 minutes, and I've set up my camera on a tripod. Now you can have your friends film you, or you can film your friends, but in my personal opinion, I just think you cannot beat a sturdy tripod. And it doesn't have to be a large one. You could even set the camera on a rock or something sturdy, but the idea is to not have the camera moving at all. It'll add a lot to your video. Now there's 3 things on the bottom of the screen that we're going to be looking at right now. Here we have, this is our shutter speed. This is our f-stop, which is the iris of the lens. And all the way to the right, we have ISO. Now, all of these things do the same thing, but in different ways. They allow how much light, how bright your picture is. I'm shooting in 24p, which is 24 frames a second, and this is kind of the iconic frame rate that you see in Hollywood films, and I film 24p in most of my videos. Ideally, you'll want the shutter speed to be double that. Now, the F number is what we're going to be adjusting right now. What I want to do is I want to get the sunset to not be overexposed. So we're going to take this number, you'll notice going up, 7.1, 8, 9. It's getting a little bit dimmer. The idea is to have the sunset not too bright. So what we're going to do here, I might change this number just a little bit. Now, normally I would keep the shutter speed at 1/50th of a second, which is double the frame rate that I'm filming in. To get around that, what I would normally do is just pop a little filter on the end of the camera, but we actually are going to be adjusting that tonight. And I think that looks pretty good right there. So F10 is the iris, the aperture. ISO, I'm going to try to keep that as low as I can at all times. Now let's see how it looks. So this is the correct exposure. This is what you want when you get silhouetted sunset shots. Now let's see what happens when I adjust the camera and make the sunset too bright. So this is the example of an overblown sunset. It's too bright, and once you can start to make out facial features or contours on skin and stuff, you're getting into the territory that you don't want. It's not a true silhouette. And the sunset doesn't look as beautiful anymore. We've lost the color. It's too washed out. So let's go ahead and go back down to the correct exposure, which is right about there. Notice all those beautiful colors have returned. Look at these nice oranges and yellows. And I'm perfectly silhouetted. Now going the opposite way from that, let's see what it looks like when everything is just too dark. So for example, here we go, we're adjusting. Now the sunset, you can barely see it. So I'm still silhouetted, and you could probably resolve some of that in Premiere Pro or in editing software, but you just want that balance. Now we just filmed this in 24 frames a second, but what I really love to do is film it in slow motion. This camera is capable of filming at 120 frames a second. Many cell phones are also capable of that. I want to show you what that looks like. So you probably can't tell it now. Maybe you can. Everything looks a little bit smoother, and that is because we are currently filming at 120 frames per second. So that means we can slow down the video without it being jerky and get these beautiful, smooth videos. Now let's say that you don't have a Sony DSLR or a Canon or a Nikon DSLR. That's okay. You can use your cell phone. Now chances are the phone is going to do exactly what you want. So let's go ahead and get my phone out and see how that does. Now everybody's phone is a little bit different, especially mine. It's very cheap, but it does, for the most part, what I want it to do. So this is just strictly the phone's automatic mode. And we're going to take a quick look and see what that looks like. We're going to hit record. I'm going to crack the whip in front of it, and we're going to see how it looks. And let's see how the results look. Again, this was 100% auto mode. The phone was doing everything for me. And let's see how it turned out. So not too bad. You can still see there's a little bit, so I'm not quite silhouetted enough. So what we're going to do here is film this again with the phone, but this time we're going to do it manually. Now my particular phone, if you tap, you'll see right there, this is the exposure. See, we can go up to make it brighter, down to make it darker. So we're doing essentially the same thing that we just did with the DSLR. I'm going to adjust it so that the sunset is just approaching the point where I think it's just too bright, while maintaining me as a silhouette. We don't want to see any details on my body. So I think that looks about good. And something that you'll notice right away that's not wrong per se, but we need to see more of my body. That sounded weird to say that. And that's why I like to stand on top of rocks or hills and stuff. So there's a little hill over here. Let's shoot this same video again on that hill. Now it's just kind of all about the framing, my friends. And get creative with it. There is no perfect right way to do this. It's something that I always try to explain in my videos, this is not the only way to do this. This is just the way that I prefer and enjoy doing it. So here we go. Again, we're going to adjust that exposure. Again, this is an example of too much. This is too much darkness, so right about there. And I'm going to stand right on that little hill over there, and we're going to give it another try. And let's go ahead and take a look at how that one turned out. So notice the difference. I'm standing on the top of this hill. Now we can see my full body. And again, this is my cell phone, guys. You can take shots with a cell phone and it will look just fine. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of filmmakers and photographers that will sometimes look down on people who use cell phones for videos and for pictures. And while I do agree that if you take photography seriously and enjoy it a lot, same goes with filmmaking, you will greatly appreciate and enjoy the extra features that a camera like this will get you. However, if you don't have the time to invest, if you don't maybe have the money to spend on a camera, a cell phone will do just fine for these types of videos. Now, a silhouetted picture in front of the sun is basically your camera, or you choosing to tell your camera to expose the sunset correctly. Everything else can be underexposed, hence the silhouette of your body. If you notice that in your videos, you can see any details on your body, any details in the whip, that means the camera's brightness is too high and you need to reduce it. Backlighting is tricky for cameras because you have two extremes. You have the brightness of that sunset, basically a light shining straight into the lens head on, and then you casting a shadow. So there's two things that the camera really has to make the best of. If your camera is set to auto, that camera is going to try to take that brightness, which is the sunset, and take that shadow, which is you. Two extremes, brightness, extremely bright, extremely dark. And this is something known as dynamic range, and different cameras can be better than others at doing this. But here's the nice thing. We don't have to worry about the camera's ability to distinguish and preserve the best of the lights and the darks, because a silhouette does not rely on that. In a silhouette, the object that is in the foreground, backlit by the sun, is all the way dark. It cannot get any darker on the screen than it is when you film it, or at least that's the way that it should be filmed. That's a true silhouette. So when you shoot the sunset, we want the sunset to be exposed correctly. Not too overblown, not to where it's all white, and not to where you can barely see the colors because it's too dark. You just want it to be natural. And light and physics will take care of the rest. If the sunset is exposed correctly, you will automatically be a silhouette. And if you're not, just bring the brightness down a little bit more. And that's really all there is to it, my friends. So thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. And I encourage all of you to get out there for the next sunset, grab your whips, and have fun and create some beautiful cinematic shots. Thank you guys so much for watching. And I'm just gonna enjoy the rest of this beautiful evening.